In 2018 and 2019, we already saw the automotive industry hit by a decline in economic activity, especially in the BRIC countries. Rising pressure has been caused by the entrance of new and digital competitors and dramatic changes to consumer preferences and behavior. In the first half of 2020, sales plummeted to historic lows due to the COVID pandemic. This has accelerated the automotive industry's need to reinvent itself even further. Now, recovery seems to be happening at a faster rate than originally expected, with forecasts predicting an 8% year on year rise in sales in 2021 and even exceeding 2019 sales levels already by 2023. This is, of course, good news for the industry. Yet some OEMs seem better positioned to take advantage of the upward trend than others. Here today with me to discuss major trends and provide an outlook of even more changes to come are four of MSX's most senior global account executives: Shawn Coyle, Xavier Vandame, Dirk Bott, and Eric Menoret. A warm welcome to you and everyone watching. My name is Anna Havekost. Thank you for joining us. Gentlemen, let's start right with the discussion. Where do you see the most far-reaching changes currently happening in the automotive industry? Is it to the business model, the products, or the services? Shawn, would you give us an insight into what is happening in the US, please?
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, certainly. What we're seeing in the U.S. is unprecedented change right now. When you think about most other commercial transactions, banking, home purchase, those industries went digital years ago, and car buying demand really stayed in a low-tech, aggravating, slow process. And really, manufacturers and dealers have been constantly getting questions about where the industry is headed. Certainly with the pandemic, there was a shift towards digitization. But really what happened is it forced OEs and dealers to quickly transform their business and take it online. Dealers had little choice but to invest in new software and technology to have a purchase experience, both for service and sales on the online process. So, you think about all those contactless options and being able to do things remote. What else is coming? I think, and you'll hear from my colleagues about different business models, but we have digital-only auto sellers. Tesla and Carvana and CarMax have introduced alternative models to vehicle purchase. And obviously, contactless sales and service is here to stay. And then when you think about the technology of the vehicle, electric vehicles are certainly a hot topic at the moment, particularly here in the U.S., but autonomous isn't going away either. And OEs are needing help in defining sort of what that strategy is going to look like. And I think that dealers and OEs right now have to really focus on that engaging customer experience and being able to take everything online and interact with consumers in an area that they want to play in. So now with all the technology off the vehicle and the car indicating when service is needed, I think, this digitization in the model, the technology within the vehicle and the alternative powertrains that are coming, this will only accelerate the need for change in the market.
Thank you, Shawn. Xavier, is digitalization also the game changer in Asia Pacific, or are other changes shaking the region?
Look, and first of all, Asia Pacific is a vast and fragmented region from a maturity point of view and a distribution point of view. Yes, digitalization is definitely, like in the rest of the world, very important in Asia Pacific. Digitalizing the customer journey is a priority for all OEMs. In the region, some markets have really embraced it, and other markets are quite behind. A fundamental element, I think it's a lot of OEMs are working on, is how do we successfully manage the customer online to offline transition. There's another important element, is how do OEMs support their dealers to fully adopt the new digital tools they are introducing. The other day, I was talking to the president of a premium brand, and today his concern is dealers are getting bombarded with the OEM's digital tools and the need to support them. So this is in a lot of OEMs' mind. Another important challenge I see in the region is the retail distribution model. This is something in the region where we had a lot of OEM trialing the agency model. Some are already quite advanced and really now looking at the lessons learned and what is working, what can be improved. Some are launching, and some are really thinking about it because they believe it's the future. And why it's the future? Because they believe that it's going to provide a more customer centric approach, and also it's going to reduce some distribution costs. Another element that Shawn mentioned was EVs. I think we probably in the region, we're probably lagging behind when it comes to the introduction of EV models.
Thank you very much. Very interesting insights. Let's stay on this topic, the agency model. Dirk, what is the maturity level here in Europe?
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, the agency model in Europe, you can say just started or have started. But I think perhaps to make first a step back, what is important? I see here three dimensions which all must work together perfectly and must build together the sustainable and profitable OM solution. I mean, this is really key. The three dimensions are structural cost reduction, fulfilling the high customer demands. We are thinking it's a customer journey, online journey, and the optimization of selling the complexity of mobility. Because the complexity really have increased during the last months and years. The engines, single over, EV, petrol, diesel, but the offers also have changed. Car abos, leasing, purchase, or the omni-channel, the normal channel today, direct channel, channel via other kind of like supermarkets. And also the aspect of connectivity will even more force all to change the current retail setup because of the ability of the OEM to connect directly with the customer. So the change in retail is a must. And probably the regulation in Europe will in certain areas slow down the speed of change in comparison with some Asian markets, as Xavier have mentioned. But for sure, it will come. And of course, there are some markets in Europe and some brands in Europe we are also working with are more ahead of the others which have installed the first parameters of this agency model, which have focused perhaps more the structural cost reduction. Some others also have focused more the customer demands, which I said earlier. But overall, the agency model has started, and we will go later more in detail.
Thank you, Dirk. So you just mentioned another important industry driver, mobility solutions, which actually add to the complexity right now. Eric, would you give us deeper insights into the latest developments in this area?
Yeah, hello to all. Mobility as a service is obviously one of the topic of the challenges of the new consumption area that we are facing. If we look back 12 months, we can see that this initiative has been slowing down through the COVID, as actually a lot of customer experimented the need to have a full time disposal of mobility. And when the lockdowns in Europe, for example, were released, we saw everywhere a huge boom on used car purchase for the customers. Nevertheless, it's an ongoing trend, major trend that will come back. Although I do believe that it will not be the only one solution. It will be mainly applying to customers living in urban areas and that do not wish to dispose too much of their wages into owning a car. By the way, another thing to notice is that so far it's very much seen as a younger generation consumption profile. I do believe that a lot more other generations, such as seniors, for example, that see their monthly pensions being reduced, could be of interest of buying mobility as a service. The next question is, there are tons of initiatives. from the OEMs, from big dealer groups, for renting companies, even finance and insurance institutions are getting into it, public authorities such as municipalities. And everybody is trying to find his way, testing solutions, which so far are not reaching their economic and profitable targets. So my view is that it's still an experimentation, but it is not yet clear who will be leading this. May also be the GAFAM, but for sure is a trend, and I don't see so far offers that are either fully covering the customer needs and allowing the commerce or the actors being profitable.
Thank you very much for this deep dive, Eric. So yes, with new solutions and products still positioning themselves and kind of being in a test phase right now in the market, profitability goals are certainly a very important focus right now for OEMs. Let's go back to you, Shawn. You mentioned earlier that EV is the hot topic in the US, or one of the hot topics in the US right now. What do you think is needed to make the product attractive for a broader customer range?
It's a great question, Anna, and certainly there's all this talk and announcements from the OEs of their shifting their product lineup to electric. Cadillac has announced that the full lineup will be electric by 2030. Audi has announced that the U.S. lineup will be 30% electrified by 2025. Ford made an announcement that they're investing $29 billion in EVs through 2025. So the OEs are committing to this model. And what the dealers are starting to look at right now is they're looking at these OE commitments, but really asking for help. If you look at this trend, there's a couple of different things that they have to address. They have to address how to engage with customers when they're not coming back on a regular maintenance interval. So how do they make sure that the customer stays loyal to the brand and to the dealership? And also that future service model. You mentioned profitability. When you look at the vehicles coming back for service, the internal combustible engines, they come back on a regular basis. They have a tried and true maintenance that has to get done. And so dealers are taking a look at that future service model and saying, we need help. And that's something that MSX is doing right now, is trying to fill in the gaps between, what are best practices to take care of the EV model and how do we drive profitability back to our dealers. As far as consumers, EVs are starting to get on the shopping list, but, the costs right now are still pretty high. Currently, EVs make up less than 2% of all U.S. new vehicle sales. Interest is certainly peaking, but when you look at consumer reports, many consumers really only want to pay a small premium for an electric vehicle, and the cost of the battery and the technology still makes it really unattractive without government subsidies. And I think in addition to what's happening too is that fear of range and anxiety, and the charging infrastructure absolutely needs to change and improve. If you look at folks that are buying vehicles, certainly majority of day-to-day driving can be handled on a home charge-based area. But when you look at going on long trips, you really need to pre-plan, because charging an electric vehicle certainly takes a lot longer than filling up a gas tank. And so, what you're seeing right now is to help address those concerns, OEs are really pushing for federal initiatives to increase charging stations. But I think certainly from a pricing standpoint, more needs to be done to address the peace of mind of consumers.
Thank you very much. So in Europe, we see that consumer acceptance of electric vehicles is a little bit higher, and more OEMs are increasing their EV offerings. Some are even launching their very own EV brands to sell directly to customers. Eric, how do you think these changes will impact the retail side of the business? Do you think it will affect the role of the dealer in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. It will probably impact a lot the whole distribution value chain. But a major OEM recently, that was Stellantis, by the way, recently announced or claimed that their, let's say, midterm objective looking at 2024, 2024 will be only to implement the agency model up to 10 to 15% maximum of their volume being put on the market. And that was following an experimentation that is now going on 9 months in at least 3 markets in Europe. So as a consequence, the need for an OEM to keep on having a proper distribution network will remain. That's one thing. The other thing is that due to the massive investments that the OEM are confronted with on EV technology, connected vehicles, and so on, they will have to find ways to make distribution leaner and less expensive. And those OEMs are also announcing today that they are claiming for their distribution network to cost less. So what will it mean? It will mean that probably they will go further into variable margins being awarded to the distribution network, that probably they are going to reduce their exigencies towards brand representation, for example, and they will probably also invite concentration into distribution network. On the other side, because they still need this profit, there will be also, which is contradictory somewhere, there will be also more demanding in dealership being loyal on parts purchase into the OEMs, because they will need those profitability, while the total consumption of parts due to EVs will be reducing. That then brings us to look at the dealer side. Dealers' profitability is at risk. OEM support provided to dealers will be reducing. That will normally drive, and we already see that, drive to concentration, meaning more and more huge multi-regional, cross-borders, multi-brand dealer groups, in order them to have the sufficient surface to face their investment, to optimize their supply, and so on. So EV, at the end, is one of the elements of the transformation, but not the only one.
Thank you very much. So OEMs have been facing heavy investments to bring new EV models to market and are looking for ways to keep their spendings at bay with new ways of distribution. Xavier, in several markets throughout Asia Pacific, the direct sales model is already up and running for some OEMs. And we've heard some changes that means to running the operations for retail networks from Eric. Could you give us further insights into this and maybe highlight what retailers in Europe could learn from this experience, how they can turn this into a profitable business model?
Yes, you are correct, Anne. As I said before, a lot of the OEMs, many OEMs have been trialing the agency model in the region. Toyota led the way back in 2018 in New Zealand. Mercedes-Benz also followed that path in South Africa in 2018. BMW in 2020 in South Africa. As we speak, Honda is launching this distribution model in Australia, and Mercedes-Benz in Australia again working on the model. And we do know that there's other OEMs that are really looking into it in various other markets. What we found or what we learned, one of the key learning is the planning. The more planning, the better, to ensure that the OEM and the dealers are aligned on the vision. They also, from an organization point of view, they're aligned. And the last but not least, it's they're aligned with the success parameters. So that's one thing that we've learned. Another something else that we've learned is the impact of fixed price. Basically, fixed pricing has very good benefits. Dealers are less competing against each other, and also with that, transparency of pricing, it's very appreciated by the consumers. They spend less time shopping around, going from one dealer to another within the same brand to see if they get a better deal. So basically, that's from a consumer point of view, has a really positive experience or impact, sorry, on CSI. And then the dealers, they shifting from a discount race to really giving the client a better customer experience, or a better selling experience, purchasing experience. Sorry, I should say. And also, there's more emphasis on the product. So now that you put away that competition on pricing, they really need to now concentrate on the product. It's important as well to what we've learned is to prepare the sales team. There's a shift in the way they're selling, and as I said before, really focusing on the product. So there's more emphasis on what are all the benefits and what am I selling? What is the value proposition? So I think that's important, and a lot of the OEMs they understood that. When you look at the new players, EV or not EV, nowadays, they're not going to be setting up dealer networks. They're going to be selling more and more online, and they will be then looking at delivering the vehicles through different channels, selected channels, and servicing the vehicles through selected channels. So the traditional OEMs, they really need to adapt. And I really believe that for many OEMs, the agency model is the first step towards the online selling model. When you look in China, I'll give you a few examples. Nayo, they started 3 years ago. They moved away from the traditional 4S dealers. What they did is they set a few showrooms in the main cities. Then also the communication, the customer engagement is mainly done via social media platforms. And when it comes to servicing, they've got partners. Those partners either are fully dedicated to Nayo, they're investors, or they are all mates. And that has been working well. You've got other examples, Xiaopeng, Weima, Liqiang. They've got an hybrid model. They've got their showrooms, and then either they've got some dealers that have either a showroom, a sales site, or a service center, or both. So this is what we've seen in the region. If I want to conclude on this model, I think what is very important is to circle back in what Dirk said. We need a sustainable model, and a sustainable model needs to work for the OEM and needs to work for the dealers. That model needs to make sure that the dealers are profitable. If they're not profitable, potentially they're going to walk away, and in that interim time, the OEMs will be left with no dealers to deliver the vehicles and eventually finalize the transaction. So I think that planning and talking to your network and making sure that it's introduced in the best way and a win-win for both.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a good deep dive into what the agency model means for the dealer network. Customer centricity is certainly becoming even more important. Dirk, could you give us some further insights maybe on what this transformation to an agency model actually means for the OEMs?
Overall, we really can say all OEMs around the globe are faced with these challenges. But the focus is different, and the maturity level of the retail network, of course, is also different. But to say it is still easier for the sales team to sell combustion engine because they are used to communicate the benefits. Whereby by EV, they are faced with customer doubts and perceptions, not always based on facts, but this is the opinion, of course, of the customers. Also, the used car value is easier to calculate for the sales team because most often the OEM have not supported the network with business cases and argumentations supporting the EV used car business. In the area of after sales, the pressure towards profitability needs a new way of offering. And even the facility infrastructure of the retail network, of the dealer as such, need to get adjusted to the new situation. This means, on one hand, investments, less profitability, and here you can see really the need to think over new business models, new offerings, and new ways. In Europe, these areas are our main focus, which means the mindset of the sales team, delivering augmentations, using the new digital tools, and on the area of after sales, mainly to give them options to get more profitable. It always depends, of course, from the retail network, as I said also earlier. And we always have to have in mind to optimize the three mentioned dimensions. Yeah, a structural cost reduction, customer online journey, and the reduction of complexity, because these all work hand in hand. Yeah, and these changes we support for different OEMs to develop. Some are really by the foundation to develop it before to install it. For some others, we piloting the new retail concepts in some markets. In Europe, in comparison to what you have heard earlier in Asia, it is in Europe still more punctual. Sometimes this new retail concept and with EVs in connection related only to certain car lines. In Asia, it is often a whole country or a whole region. And what MSX support the OEM is to going really to from the traditional way today to a pure agency model. And this in the area of sales or after sales, or we focus the whole retail network. We also have to consider here one point. MSX is working with traditional OEMs. And what is a traditional OEM in this context? I mean, someone who has the retail network as you know it today, dealers, after sales, some independent repairs they're working with. But newcomers, we are also working with them together, which don't have a retail network. Of course, they are really starting and are really disruptors for the traditional OEMs, because they can work from a white blank piece of paper, which is an advantage on one hand, of course also a challenge when it comes to after sales network as such. And here we are supporting both sides, the disruptors or the ones which starting more or less directly with the direct sales channel, and of course the traditional OEMs. For one thing is clear, this change of retail, it will not come, it really have started. And this we see really by the different markets as well as in Europe.
So increased focus on vehicle electrification has been accelerated by global political agendas with the aim to minimize triggers and impact of climate change. This has created some pressure on OEMs and on dealer networks. On the one hand, OEMs have to make heavy investments. Increasing EV penetration certainly means increasing the EV product portfolio, leading to heavy investments in R&D and factory redesign on the OEM side. On the other hand, we see dealers suffering from cost cuts in the distribution model and decreasing service revenue. And last but not least, what adds to all of this is that the great majority of customers are still hesitant to go electric due to range anxiety and insufficient public and private investments in charging infrastructure. Okay, we've already touched a little bit the digitalization of the retailer, maybe more from a retailer perspective. Let's now change to the customer perspective. Leading brands in some industries had already provided a fully online, end-to-end retail experience before the COVID pandemic hit, while others quickly followed in their footsteps. Shawn, where do you see OEMs and their retail network in terms of digital retail maturity? And how well does the retail experience they provide actually match customer needs?
The business was forced to go online, and what my colleagues have already referenced is a transformation. And when you see the customer shifting their journey from 80% of the shopping has been digitally. Certainly you had those OEs and progressive dealers that you referenced that have kind of had that experience already. But it's really that mindset needs to change with how to provide a great digital retail experience. And what it actually allows dealers to do is connect with consumers much earlier in the sales funnel if they have that engaging online presence. Customers can shop, they can reserve a vehicle for a test drive, they can complete paperwork online. So tools such as live chat have really been enhanced to again provide that great connection. But when you think about the offline, and Dirk mentioned a seamless transition from online to offline, offline is still obviously critical to the car buying journey. Test drives are still the number one factor in purchase decisions. And really now you have leads coming in from multiple digital sources. And how do you make sure that all those leads are being followed up on? The next shift from a digitized end-to-end experience is also on the finance service. How do you sell extended warranties online? How do you sell in-vehicle subscription services? And, will we start to do extended range purchases, et cetera? So from the model, certainly sales has always been at the forefront. You could certainly spec out vehicles and order vehicles, reserve vehicles, but really digital tools and after sales have really been accelerated over the last few months. And really, if dealers want to exceed in this market, besides the ability to pick up a vehicle for service or drop off a vehicle after the purchase, they need to offer mobile service, online service booking, upsell approval. So how do we keep customers informed of what's going on with the vehicle while it's in service, and also remote payment options? When you think about also the aftermarket, this is not just a transformation and a shift for dealers and OEs. The aftermarket is fully embracing these digitized trends. They have many different options for service: curbside service, contact-free service. Even, some aftermarket companies allow you to stay in the vehicle when it's hoisted on a lift, so you remain in the vehicle during the service. And so you also have new companies such as RepairSmith and Your Mechanic, where they actually schedule the repair and come to your driveway. And so it's really more important now than ever. If dealers and OEs want to retain these customers, they have to shift that model, and they have to offer digitized solutions to allow customers to engage in the space and area that they're comfortable with. And really, with that mindset, and we've heard it from my colleagues already, is, the fact that everything has to happen at the dealership. That mindset has to change because you're already seeing it. You've got Tesla changing the game. Very few dealerships. Most of the 90% of the time, the vehicle is picked up for service. They never go to the workshop. And then obviously over-the-air updates are done for the majority of repairs. Xavier mentioned, transparency, and that's what customers want. Many years ago, even when you were searching for a new vehicle, it was like pulling teeth to get a quote from a dealer on a lease or a finance purchase. It was always come to the dealership and we'll take you through our process and then we'll get you that price. Then other companies and competitors came in like TrueCar, where they offered pricing transparency. So now, obviously, in this shift and transformation to a digitized experience, now you can get that price and feel comfortable with that price. But now what you have to look at is transparency and service as well. If I'm booking a service appointment online, the expectation is still that if I book a 10 o'clock appointment, my vehicle is in the workshop at 10 o'clock. That's not always the case. And so dealers, through this process for sales and service, need to constantly bring that transparency to the forefront for consumers. And, there's obviously some gaps. And if you want to be successful, you really have to think about, what's changing. And not only that digitized experience, that may also change the model of staffing. Do you have fewer sales consultants, and do you shift more to product specialists and technology specialists? I think you'll certainly see for dealers to really meet those customer demands, they need to increase in business development centers and remote specialists to be able to answer questions and deal with consumers in a timely basis. And, all these changes are occurring. I think that the customer demands will constantly increase. And so, the goal is always going to shift, but these changes won't stop.
So we can say that dealers struggle with the transitioning to a more digital-oriented customer journey, especially in the service area. But there have been some major leaps happening in the US, as you just mentioned, Shawn. Xavier, where do we stand with this in Asia Pacific?
Look, I think we're probably a little bit behind, except China. China is always ahead when it comes to new technology, new processes, or new models. But if I look at Asia Pacific, none of the OEMs today have a end-to-end customer journey that digital. We recently did what we call a digital readiness assessment. So what we did is we've got a thorough and comprehensive approach or tool or methodology to assess the OEM digital customer journey. So we looked at all the OEMs, what journey they offer, and also compared against customer expectations. And it was interesting because we found that obviously none had an end-to-end. There was some missing or some gaps. But also when we presented the results to the clients, often they were not surprised. Either they were working on those gaps, or it's something that they felt, oh wow, I probably need to work on it against the competition. One element that always comes, and we were talking before about the online to offline transition, how you make that successful. An element that was always, or that is always missing, is basically during that journey, is the ability to have a human interaction with the OEM. Let's say, I'm going through that journey, and I'm not ready yet to visit a dealership, but I would like to talk to someone. I would like to ask some questions. For the best in the class, they had a chatbot, which is not quite a human intervention, but for most of them, you cannot talk to someone. And talking to someone remotely is important when you're not ready to visit a dealership, because you want to ask questions. You want a tailored product presentation. You want to talk to someone that can answer your questions about particular features in the model. You cannot find everything on internet, even though more and more of the websites have more and more information about all the models. You would like to talk to someone. If again, I've got an example. Shawn mentioned the test drive. It is important to visit a dealership for test drives. When you look at China, again, many of the EV brands, you don't need to visit a dealership to have a test drive. What you can do is you can register online. You will have a QR code, and then you go to a specialized or dedicated facility. It's not a dealer, where you can pick up your vehicle and then have a test drive. So these are some of the activities or what's the situation in Asia Pacific.
Thank you. So, Eric, you also mentioned earlier the fact that becoming lean, becoming more profitable, more cost efficient is a priority on everyone's agenda. However, Xavier just mentioned that dealers are struggling with this transition to a more online oriented customer journey, especially with the online and offline integration. So, my question is, how do we bring these two together? How can dealers become more successful at implementing new technology that actually enables them to reach a higher operational performance?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The funny thing in this is that somewhere dealer groups were brought to experiment digital sales, digital customer journey management, because they were forced to do it through the lockdowns that applied in each other country in Europe through the COVID again. So now they really can say and can feel what does it mean to keep on being able to be selling actively cars in a fully digital environment. I may place to you, I share with you one feedback from a major dealer group that I talked with in France, who decided through the lockdown in March, April, and May last year to implement digital product presentation with potential leads customers. And so they've got a call center where they receive some customer requests. They were qualifying those requests, driving to make product presentation and customer interview from their dealer showroom, right? And they went through more than 1,500 digital presentation with their customers. At the very end, they were able to sell 5 cars, fully digital. And at the very end, most of the sales consultants were really questioning the efficiency of those digital product presentation or interviews. And the outcome of these particular dealers, but to a lot more number of dealers, was that full digital sales in the traditional customer journey, which is I want to buy a car, is not proven being efficient, and that there is and there will be still a need of, yes, what I call a phygital customer journey, which is, yes, a mix of lots of things are done digitally, but there is still a need for physical interaction, as Xavier was mentioning, to test drive the car, to have a physical one-to-one negotiation with a sales consultant, and what I call making the papers, right? And that is really in the core so far of a dealer mandate, right? We could look at full digital alternative players and so on, but the dealer by essence is there to interact with the customer. So if we look at this, what are the lessons we could learn out of it in terms of challenges for the distribution ahead? Obviously, being able, and there is a lot to say, being able to manage tons, thousands, billions of signals coming from the customers, leads coming from the customers, and being able to do it on time, professionally, and with a mix of digital and physical interaction. The second one, I think, is what should be my next sales force? Can I transform as a dealer my traditional sales consultant sales force? Training and education should be enough. Changing the behavior and the mindset, can I implement it? Or do I need to go to disruption and finding new sales words than the one I got traditionally? And the third one that maybe we did not touch upon so far is everything which is around CRM, DMS, IT, legacy system integration, which is a field of complexity which is enormous, which is something that I would not say dealers are discovering now, but dealers need to cope with. A huge dealer group is by essence multi-brand, is still obliged to run with different CRM systems, which are the one from the OEMs. Very often they need to have two, 3 DMSs. They are publishing their offers on their own website, but on a vast number of other advertising websites and so on, and they are receiving data from everywhere. And that is really one of their main concerns. And I'm going to end being back of what I said before. All those lessons learned are certainly also pushing for more concentration into dealers' network, because the complexity, the field of play is so complex that the bigger you are, probably the most easy it is to face the investment and the challenges.
Thank you, Eric. So what we're seeing across regions is one of the pain points being definitely the increase in complexity. But what we are also seeing is a difference in customer expectations dependent on the region. There's still a long way to go to get full acceptance of a digital customer journey by the end customer here in Europe, as where the OS customer might already expect a fully digital journey, as mentioned Dirk, from an OEM standpoint. What do you think has to happen to facilitate a comprehensive digital transformation? And do you see any differences in the way premium and volume brands are approaching this challenge?
And I would like to split this answer perhaps in two areas. First, I would like to say something to the digital solution, and also afterwards and to the difference of volume or premium brands. I would like to mention that digital solution today is also a buzzword because overall in every service MSX offering to the OEM, we always include digital solutions. So I think here we're really meaning the digital transformation, which making the change we are talking all the time about. I see here two areas. One is the training with digital solutions and the usage of digital solution to support the customer journey. I would start with the training. MSX saved millions in one country for one customer, where we transferred his traditional training approach in a digital one. We moved a split from 70% traditional and 30% digital into 20% traditional and 80% digital approach, where we used VBT, VCT, microlearning, 2D and 3D animation, augmented reality, and other technology. If wished, a whole product launch could be done digital. So you can see this now here, it could be commercial, it could be technical training, but this transformation, this is really done in a lot of countries by a lot of brands today. So this is really nothing. If someone have here not started, I think he will be have really problems in the future. And MSX done this for several OEM. If you consider the centralization of all these central training areas and the coverage of several countries, the saving for an OEM was enormous because this several millions was only for one country, for one customer. And of course, we done it on a central level and then localize it for different markets. It was really big step where we are more at the end. So the most things are digitalized in their strategy. The other digital solution, as I mentioned earlier, is more the usage. It's related to the online customer journey. It's a huge opportunity for the OEM. But of course, of the current setup, also a big challenge. Yes, we support several OEMs to integrate digital solutions to fill the customer expectation. The biggest task for us is to build it into the OEM ecosystem without increasing the complexity. To keep it simple for the OEM, the retail network and the customer. I mean, this is really the task, to integrate it into the ecosystem. To change the retail network mindset, to ensure it is managed and planned, is often the bigger challenge as the integration of the digital element. I mean, to integrate a digital element could be also sometimes very easy, but important is that the retail network also change the mindset and also use it. And for other OEMs, we do not even integrate these online sales to optimize the retail network. MSX developing and executing it to strengthen their own OEM online sales and after sales positioning and the direct line to the customer. So it is not done only for the retail network, it is more done for the OEM because he would like to have it at a later state for direct link to the customer. Coming to the next part of your question then, this was, are there differences between luxury, premium, and volume brands? I would say overall, we support all, including, as I said also earlier, the disruptors. And the disruptors will have entered this year or last year, and more will come in the next years, as you know. And the main difference is always the complexity and the scalability. especially by the disruptors, because the complexity is much lower and the scalability is much more important, because they're missing also the offline network, which is for them, again, a challenge, but also an opportunity. But overall, we see no difference in the quality or premiumness of the online approach. Because it is not a surprise, because the customer always expect a high, seamless approach. And of course, this all OEMs try to deliver. And they also have to deliver this, independently if it's a volume or a premium brand. The difference lies in the maturity level of the network, as well as the legal regional terms. And of course, the OEM DNA. Here, it really differs depending from the market and from the OEM. We have experienced that the launch of single digital solutions from chatbot, virtual showroom, booking system, etc., up to the launch of a platform is always the biggest challenge to integrate this in an ecosystem of the OEM. So it could be one digital solution, it could be the whole platform, the whole customer journey, which starting getting more and more. Why does it getting more and more due to this effect? We are talking about a new retail agency model, and at a certain point, for different car lines or in different markets, OEM would like to take it over, this customer journey more or less. Of course, they need a platform which can manage all of this. Well prepared and aligned with the main stakeholders, we see more and more OEM which implement the whole process instead of digital solutions. And to do this is a huge challenge, but even a bigger opportunity. Nobody should neglect, because it is the future.
Thank you very much. Shawn, although there are some individual big dealer groups, most digitalization efforts are implemented by the OEMs at a global level, as Dirk just mentioned. How important do you feel is local market knowledge there, or how important are localization efforts in these initiatives?
Yeah, it's a great question, and really the local market knowledge is extremely important. You know, we've been talking for the past bit about the digitized tools and the individualized sales and service experience, and really the same individual experience applies to the regions. You know, you've heard from my colleagues, each region is unique. The OEs are certainly becoming more global. They obviously want to try to leverage economies of scale and roll out these global initiatives. However, as you've heard from my colleagues here, each market is certainly unique from where it is at from a maturity and really technology standpoint. And I think that's where MSX sets itself apart, because we understand the nuances and we understand where each of the markets are within that digitization transformation. And, you know, at MSX, we often use the term, you know, glocal, where we can, you know, kind of standardize a program or a rollout. 80% of the process could be the same, but you really need to account for that 20% of the regional customization for market differences. Because while someone at a global OE might say, this is what we want to do, some of those tools and the technology may not exist or be ready yet in the respective market. One example is sort of the work that we're doing with electric vehicles. You know, we can leverage the head start being taken with electric vehicles being done in Europe and bring that knowledge and bandwidth to the United States to really help and engage those markets. So I think, you know, again, OEs will constantly be looking for a global solution, but, you know, some of the providers that they're partnering with might not be, local in every country. And that's where we can come into play to help identify what's the best case and use of introducing these tools to the consumer.
Thank you. So yes, training is definitely one example where adaptations to local market conditions, culture, and customer behavior are of utmost importance. And we've already heard from Dirk how cost-effective training setups have successfully helped OEMs and NSCs save a lot of money. So let's move on to the last topic of today's session. Pressure is very high and furthermore increasing with the entrance of new players that have been disrupting the industry. So the incumbents seem to react to this with even more mergers and acquisitions. Most recently, we saw FCA and PSA forming Stellantis. What can we expect the business landscape to look like in the next 5 years? Fragmented or consolidated? And what other trends do you see emerging? And Shawn, let's stay with you.
Certainly this is a very exciting time in the automotive industry. There's tremendous change being brought about by digitization and technology. And really, I equate this time as very much like the early days of automotive manufacturing when you had a lot of OEs or a lot of companies and startups trying to manufacture vehicles and looking at, some stayed, many failed, but I think that's kind of where we are right now. You have, what's driving, I think, these partnerships is the technical development with regard to, future technologies, electric, autonomous, connected cars. It's a huge investment. And Anna, you mentioned the merger of FCA and PSA to form Stellantis. Now you have, Ford and VW collaborating to drive down development costs of electric and allow for broader distribution for electric vehicles and commercial vehicles. Toyota and Subaru have partnered together to improve their manufacturing and production in the CASE, which is connected, autonomous, shared, and electric era. And really the philosophy is they can partner together to make even better cars beyond what they could do on their own. I think, again, with this technology and these costs of investment, I think the partnerships will increase. The other thing these partnerships allow the OEs to do is they increase scale and global presence. So, one OE might get access to a new market, another one might get access to products or services that they don't provide. And so I think while they're exploring these partnerships, there's still uncertainty of what this is going to look like going forward. As I mentioned earlier, some of these partnerships will fail, others will succeed, and we're seeing that now. Where certain investments, didn't pan out, others have continued to thrive. Besides the OEs and these traditional, incumbents, you also have, new players that are changing the game. And then you also have potentially players yet to be determined that might be entering into the automotive space. I think Tesla changed the game, both from a manufacturer and distribution model. There's new electric companies popping up. And you even have software companies such as Google that are in the market really fueling that autonomous vehicle change. And so, I think there's going to be both fragmentation as well as consolidation. And one of the things of these new companies that are popping up is, are they going to want to stay in the long run and be a manufacturer like a Tesla? Or are they simply looking at technology and being able to sell that technology to an incumbent? I think at the retail model, you've heard from my colleagues, I think that's also going to change. We talked about potentially the structure of their model of sales consultants, product specialists, the digitization transformation. But even from a standpoint of, are we going to move forward in the next 5 years to a subscription model where you might have a monthly payment, for a sports car, but you get access to a pickup truck on the weekends to do landscaping and that type of stuff. Also, the model distribution. I mean, are we going to see dealerships consolidate? More of those partnerships. So again, I think in the long run, I definitely see more consolidation to fuel those investment costs. I do see some consolidation in the retail network, but it's the future is unknown, and that's why it makes it so exciting.
Thank you very much, Shawn. Eric, what is your take on the future scenario?
Yeah, no doubt that the competitive landscape is going to push for more collaboration, merger and acquisition. It's not only because of the newcomers coming in the market. It's also because the need from the OEMs to finance new enormous investments, in particular to meet the CO2 objectives, so to develop electrical vehicles is enormous. And link with the electrical vehicle there is also another risk coming, which is a diminution or the reduction of the margin on parts. So all of this pushes certainly for more M&A type of approach. Last but not least, that needs to be price competitive because it will have to be affordable by the customers. My view is that similar to the OEMs, I already told it, suppliers and dealers are going also to concentrate furthermore. A funny thing or an interesting thing is that this process is also easing the introduction of the newcomers in the market because the dealers are willing to diversify their risk and to invite more and more brands to be distributed. If you look at one in Europe, which is MG, it has been quite easy for them to come on the market and to contract dealers to distribute their products very, very fastly. I was looking at this against, let's say 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, where newcomers, in particular from Korea, were coming in Europe, and it was a lot more painful or difficult for them to set up a distribution network. Last but not least, and this is already happening, what we also see in terms of M&A cooperation, collaboration, is OEMs aligning with energy big companies and also to technology providers, which makes sense because the energy companies need to find ways to compensate the further reduction of oil through the mobility, and technology provider because they can bring probably very fastly technologies which are required from the OEMs. And as I said, we saw example, for example, Stellantis and Total, who are building those giant batteries factories in Europe at a pace which is accelerating a lot. We've got also GM and Elke Kane in North America, or more recently, still on French OEMs, Renault to ally with Dassault Systèmes, who is a software company, as everybody knows. Atos, who is a IT service provider, very far advanced on data management, for example, or ST Electronics. So yes, M&A collaboration and cooperation are coming, are increasing, with which is quite new. OEMs aligning more and more with not only OEMs but peripheral business that are also of need of optimization.
Thank you, Eric. Would you like to add on?
The most important thing is that this change has started. And the ones which are not prepared or even implement these changes today, they will be out tomorrow. The need of change we explained, and to get the best benefits out of the upcoming increasing connectivity requires the new retail setup. Connectivity we have not even touched so much, but it will be, of course, key tomorrow. And we need to consider this today in the setup. In the future, it will be a mix of few traditional elements we have mentioned, mixed with a lot of new ones arose last years and will increasing significant. So we all are prepared, and now we are talking about execution. Thanks a lot, Anne.
So let's wrap up for today. On your outlook, Xavier, please.
I think to add something that we haven't said is what I'm finding in this region in Asia Pacific is that the OEMs are more and more versatile when it comes to where they want to be present, their geographic footpaths and the way they want to be represented. We've seen recently, Nissan decided in Indonesia to become, to sell vehicles through a distributor rather than a national sales company. We've seen General Motors deciding to leave India, such a big market. So what we find is they're probably going to be more reactive when it comes to assessing, is it worth to be in a market? Are we profitable and financially viable? And some of the region or some of the markets in Asia Pacific show that. And I think as a conclusion, we talked about online sales, we talked about EVs, we talked about distribution model, we talked about connected vehicles. We didn't talk about the change of regulation. There's a lot of regulation changes in a lot of markets. And as a conclusion, I think we will be seeing more changes in the few next year than we've seen probably in the past 20 years. And I think that's very exciting.
Thank you very much. Okay, this brings us to the end of today's session. Now, we are always returning to the common denominator of increased complexity of OEMs and dealers having to balance heavy investments in electrified product portfolios, mobility solutions, and digitalization efforts, while at the same time struggling with changing distribution models, different customer journeys, as well as changes to customer behavior and expectations. Those OEMs will emerge as winners that successfully integrate all these aspects into a profitable business model. This is true for both industry disruptors that have embraced innovative products and distribution models, yet might face unsustainable manufacturing capacity and lack the heavy financial muscle to survive mid to long term. But it's also true for incumbent OEMs that have accommodated to the changes at different levels of speed and success, leading to the need, for example, of investment in startup capabilities or for consolidation and partnership across the value chain. I feel we've explored interesting insights into some of the major trends that are happening in the automotive industry from the point of view of all main stakeholders and highlighting regional differences across the globe. I'd like to thank our contributors today, Dirk Bott, Menoret, Xavier Vandame, and Shawn Coyle. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to our team for making this video possible. And on behalf of MSX, a big thank you to our audience. We hope you enjoyed accompanying us today in our discussion and would love to welcome you again to one of our next sessions. Until then, we invite you to explore some of our articles or podcasts on www.msxi.com. Feel free to reach out to us if you have questions or wish to receive further details on any of the topics that we discussed today. See you soon and stay healthy.